Jetzt ist es ja erst
Hallo.
28.
Hallo. Wunderschönen guten Nachmittag miteinander. Very welcome to Lucerne, to Fumetto 2022. Ich switche auf Deutsch. Nachher gibt es ein multilinguales Gespräch. Ich freue mich sehr, euch zu dieser zweitletzten Folge in der Reihe unserer Podiumsdiskussionen Superpower etc. begrüßen zu dürfen. Wir sprechen heute über Superpower, Smash the Norm. Nein, das war vorher. Superpower to the people. Passt aber auch eigentlich das Ganze. Ich bin sehr glücklich. I'm very happy to have two amazing guests with me, two amazing artists, creators, comic artists, thinkers and storytellers. Lika Nüssli from St. Gallen, all the way to Lucerne. Peter Poplaski from Wisconsin, and Franz all the way to Lucerne. I'm very happy to welcome you here on stage with a very new project and an old project, a very mythical project and a very down-to-earth topic. And thank you, Lars von Törni, who is moderating this talk. Thank you very much. And you will be able to see the talk also online on our website if you missed something, and also the whole series of Superpower panels. Thank you very much, and have an inspiring, rich hour.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jana. Thank you. And thank you everyone for coming, and hello everyone out there in the digital sphere. Yes, today we have two guests here on stage who represent two seemingly different topics that, when you look closer, have surprisingly many things in common. Because, well, to start with the two people here on stage, they're actually two superpowered creative minds behind two extraordinary bodies of work displayed in two outstanding exhibitions that you can see at the moment. One here at Fumetto Festival until tomorrow, the other one in Basel for a few more weeks, actually until the end of May. So we have two superpower creators here who are telling stories about people with superhuman strength in challenging times. As you will see, there are very different people in very different times, and their superpowers are quite different. But there's quite a bit of an overlap as well when you look closer at your work. And that's what we're going to do today. Lika Nüssli, as I said, at the moment has a beautiful exhibition at the Cartoon Museum in Basel, which I highly recommend to visit. We will also have a bit of a look at it later, but you have to see it in real. And the highlight, the climax of that exhibition is her latest book, Starkes Ding, which just came out recently with Edition Moderne, based on a real-life part of her family history. And I would briefly like to ask you, Lika, to briefly introduce yourself. You have done so many things over the years in so many fields, and we're going to touch upon a few, but how do you normally introduce yourself to audiences like this?
I'm an artist, a female artist. I'm based to the narrative art, but I like to be in between contemporary art, drawing, painting, illustration, performances. But I think, as I said, the relationship between all this art is to collect story and to get it into a new form and to tell new stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Peter, you've also collected stories and told stories, and you've been drawing stories, you've been curating stories in many different positions. You're painter and illustrator, sketchbook artist, Zorro impersonator, and so many more things. How would you introduce yourself?
Well, if I was going to describe, my career or my focus is always on personal evolution. In other words, I create projects that take a long time. They have their own level of where they want to go, depending on what kind of clues or what kind of objects I find that I must, put together to come up with some sort of answer. But the thing about the superheroes is something that I grew up as a kid, and it was a fun thing. And of course, when I grew up with television and comic books as a 1-2 punch, adults were not supposed to, lie to children. So Superman was real, Zorro was real. They're like black and white film on TV. Then you get a comic book. You sit down and you say, so I learned to draw Zorro. I learned to draw Superman. I practiced making the S and all this kind of stuff. And it gave me sort of like a role model or a master class in figure drawing, just because at one time I counted up all the different artists I liked, and I would buy anything they did, and I had like 17 different artists that gave me something that gave, a different kind of direction, whatever they drew, whether it was monsters or even if it was humorous stuff. Because I didn't just draw superheroes, I drew Fred Flintstone, I drew Woody Woodpecker, I drew Mickey Mouse and these characters. It was anything that, again, it's a focusing technique. It's developing your eye-hand coordination one way or another. And in America, this might lead to not a career in being an animator or a cartoonist, but you might get a job as a university professor or a teacher.
Yeah, you've worked in many fields, and now here at the festival, you're most prominently here as a curator of this show, which still is on display until tomorrow at the Red House at Industriestraße, which brings together a lot of your own works, a lot of works of the artists that you appreciate, that you mentioned, a lot of your collection of collectibles, posters, etc., etc. And you've been a fan, I guess, a lifetime, plus you've been a creative force in the comics world for 50 years. So I'm curious, Peter, curating a show is more than just presenting something. It is also selecting, boiling down a lifetime of work to a few walls, basically. So how did it feel to put together this show, and how did you approach it?
Well, I brought a couple examples. First of all, I don't consider myself a writer, although I know what good writing is, and I know what it looks like on a wall in an art museum. And so what I did was I started reading all kinds of books. And I pick up a book, I look at it, I say, tell me something I don't know. I flip to the back, flip it, stop, read a paragraph. I say, that's an interesting idea. Close it, do it again. If I can get 3 ideas from a book, I have to buy the book. Now then, I have to go and pick out the paragraphs that I said, that's a good idea, write it in here so I remember it, and then I reduce it down to a simple idea. That way, multiple ideas can gather and start making connections almost by accident. The other thing I did, because Zorro's a comic book, who cares about comic books anyway? We want to know about classical literature and stuff. So I made this simple, easy to follow chart of literature and all the basic aspects of popular writing and how it traces to Zorro. If you follow this little map and read all these books, after about 20 or 30 years, you'll be sitting up here talking to an audience. It's that simple. But what I did was I reduced literature or popular culture to detective mystery, exotic, epic location stories that, begins with like Marco Polo's adventures and things back in the 12th century, historical romance, which is Don Quixote on to Ivanhoe and the Three Musketeers, and then Western adventure. And then through a zigzagging trickle-down thing, where does The Mark of Zorro by Johnson McCulley, how does it fit in to where these ideas flow? And so that gave me a basic structure, at least in comparing popular with classic. And then from there, you just play with the idea like a ping pong ball and trip over accidental mass characters or, again, somebody like the great writer Baroness Olmsey, who created the Scarlet Pimpernel, which is considered an important pre-Zorro type character and an influence on Zorro. So I'm just interested in how one influence hits another influence, and we have an idea that nobody gets sued over.
And we'll have a closer
What
look
a concept.
So is this roughly how you also prepared for your exhibition, Lika?
Not at all.
No, but how was it in your case? Because you've also done so much. You've started as a fabric artist, you're illustrator, you're a painter, you're doing performance art, you work with texts. How did you boil that down into an exhibition? How was that experience?
Mm-hmm. In fact, it was very nice. And Annette helped me a lot, the curator of the Cartoon Museum. First of all, I looked through all my work I did in the last 20 years. It was very nice to find some stuff I had forgotten. And then I really showed her, I made a selection, and it was all over in my studio. And then we took a closer look around one day at all my stuff I prepared, and then we decided what we want to show. That we want to show the way of how I'm exploring my work, or how it. Exactly. How it revolved. And the nice thing at the Cartoon Museum is there are a lot of different rooms, different spaces, and in each room there is another atmosphere, and so we could put in every room one issue, one theme, and. Yes, and then we visualized it on the computer, and thought it was nice to show the different aspects of my work, and so it came out. And, and at the end, it was really quite phenomenal to see my own work in an objective way, to look at this work I've done, and. It was very nice to be proud of myself, to feel that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of beautiful art to see, and this is the room that deals with the current book, Starkes Ding, which we will have a closer look at later, and also it's more of some of your other work. Now I'd like to enter the labyrinth of each of your works a little more. Oh, I forgot to say that now this is where we need the sound. Could we have a wire for the sound? Because very soon we will have a look at a video, and we think we need a wire for that. Because now we're entering the different labyrinths, and Peter brought a video to sort of welcome us to the labyrinth that is related to his work. We just want to make sure that you can all hear it. Yeah. And it's a short video of 2 or 3 minutes, but it gets you into the mood of what Peter was talking about earlier. And this is how it should start.
I'm really enjoying this week in the south of France. It's a really great place. I'm in a small little village. And I know there's a lot of reasons you come down to the south of France, but one of the most interesting things is in this little town, there is one of the world's foremost experts on Zorro. Now, I hope to run into him at some point. It's pretty hard to find Zorro, In general, the guy's a pretty elusive character. And I've had my eyes open, but I can't seem to find him. It's a beautiful town and all, but I just don't know if I'm ever going to find him. Because...
You looking for me, senor?
Oh, okay. Everybody, Pete Poplaski, the man who turns into Zorro. Like, what's the preoccupation with Zorro?
Well, there's nobody paying me. This is a project I've developed over 20 years. I'm a very serious artist. If you're going to do a painting about Zorro or a book about Zorro, you got to become the character. My life has always been inspired by all the TV viewing I watched as a kid. So Superman, Zorro, and the Lone Ranger are my heroes. To be a serious artist, I think you have to be heroic in the way that they're heroic.
I don't know if this is too much to ask, but I've never had a fencing class. Could you give me a couple sorry.
My friend, it would be my pleasure.
Okay. Okay. I yield. Well, I think I'm gonna have to practice a little more before we meet again, you know?
Well, that would be advisable, but I want you to know, I don't do this every day. You know, Zorro is this kind of character. He appears when he's needed. And the point of the character is that anyone can be Zorro if they just go into themselves and pull out their most heroic qualities.
So I guess I don't really know where I'm gonna meet you again, because
You never know. Zorro just appears.
he does. Yeah, I guess so. What? Where the hell did that guy go?
I didn't know you were a performance artist too.
Well, there's a PhD thesis.
Thank you. So Peter's offering fencing classes after this talk. Eric?
Oh, yes, we could have some, if we have enough epées and foils and sabers. Be glad to show a few tricks of the trade.
But I'm curious, Peter, you mentioned that earlier that Zorro is a childhood hero of yours, and so are a few other characters that one can see in the show. A lot of us have childhood heroes, but then when you grow older, the connection to these characters often just fades away. So what is it about Zorro and the superheroes, the masked Avengers, that sort of created a lifelong relationship for you?
You're exactly right. I mean, I grow up and I outgrow the characters, and I'm studying fine art, and I'm traveling to Italy, and I'm interested in fresco painting and etching and all kinds of things, and not, really into comics at all, but it's a side thing. If I happen to see, if I was in Italy and I saw a Zorro comic, I say, well, this is curious. I think I'll buy it and see if I can read Italian. And actually, I did that with Popeye. It was a way to read the early 1930s Popeye artwork, but it was in Italian, so I had to use a dictionary. But these things come back for different reasons. And when you see them again and you're an adult, in the case of Zorro, I was at a Christmas party, and my friend's children were watching the Disney Channel, and it was a Zorro episode, and I went, what's this? And I watched it with them, and I thought, that was better than I remembered. Why is it better than, it could be when you're a kid? Because when you're a kid and you play Superman, Zorro, and the Lone Ranger, you're not pretending. You are imitating. You are the character until your mother yells at you to quit climbing on the furniture. And so it comes back as a surprise. And in my case, because I was a fine artist, I was painting landscapes and still lifes, but at the same time I was working in comics, working with underground cartoonists, working with old cartoonists like Milton Caniff and Will Eisner and Harvey Kurtzman, which again, I've just had, I was lucky. It was magical to have a working relationship with all these amazing guys simply because I had the artistic background and I had the cartoonist interest. And I idolized all these guys as heroes. Anybody that has shown me, or, you might say something about their work has attracted my eye, or their stories, they're a master that I'm learning something from, and they're always on a pedestal. So I always had a great time with all these people, and everything just keep evolving on and off with these superhero things. And then if I get a chance, I try to do a book project about it. But when I can't do the book project, like in the case of Zorro, Dennis Kitchen, my publisher, said, we don't want to deal with Disney. They just want a lot of money and we can't afford it and all this stuff. And of course, I, made a very determined grimace on my face and say, no one's going to stop me from doing this. I said, look, Zorro has made money with Douglas Fairbanks, with Tyrone Power, with Walt Disney, with 26 Italian and Spanish Zorro movies and stuff. Why can't we make money too? And he just didn't think it was something he's interested in. He's more interested in the underground. So I just said, I'm going to do it no matter what. And it evolved from that point to where people would come and say, oh, you're the Zorro guy, this is for you, or you must have lost this or something. Or here's a present you'll get a kick out of. And so I would go through phases where then I'd develop the idea, but then I'd back off. And then it would come back and bite me again, and then I'd have to continue work on it. So it's an organic, it's like a cancer, and one day it'll be free, and then I'll have a cure for it or something.
I'm just wondering, what's the definition of a hero for you? What's your definition?
Well, first of all, a real hero is just confronted with extraordinary circumstances where he manages to conquer his own fears and can either help or save someone, or it's almost an unconscious, spontaneous gesture. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, like in superhero comics, you're transformed back into your regular, normal person, But we all have abilities that we don't think about or use simply because we're not put to the test. Mm-hmm. But again, being put to the test sometimes can be extreme. Mm-hmm. But we're all heroic in one way or another, and it's the focus that we get from the challenges that we accept. I mean, I'm sure you felt that in your career where you have things you're trying to finish, and it feels like something's blocking the whole evolution of this project, but you're not going to let it stop you. Yeah. And I bet you it was a thrill working with your father too, to get this interaction with a family member like that. That's amazing.
Yes, and we will have a look at that in just about a minute. I'm just curious a little more, Peter, when we go through your exhibition, and here are just a few exhibits from that, showing all sorts of classical heroes and heroines. It seems to me that there is a message that goes beyond documenting that part of time that you want to send out for the current time also. Like you were saying, there's a potential superhero in anyone. So is there a bit of a message that you would like to send out with your exhibition, showing sort of the positive force that heroic characters such as the ones you're presenting there can embody?
Well, the basic superhero or the adventure character is all about transformation. And this is all in classical writing and everything. The most interesting characters are somebody who's weak, who becomes strong, or whatever in order to, bring the story or the drama to a conclusion. The thing about Zorro, because it was a silent movie and there was all this pantomime in it, it is larger than life because of the extreme motions and stuff, and because it was a silent movie and you're reading the text, it's like radio then. The text is in your mind, the gestures are on the screen, and you're participating much more than you usually do in a movie today, mm-hmm. which is you're buffeted by sound effects. You see car explosions and stuff all over the place. People are hurling buildings at each other, and you say, wow, that's a great special effect. That's a great computer thing. But you're removed from it. Whereas in the old silent movie days, it demanded something of you.
Yeah, there were left some holes, you can enter it.
Pardon?
There were left some holes, you can enter it.
Yes, and identify with these different characters. And the basic thing is, again, the transformation. And in Zorro's case, it's a man of knowledge who, to protect his family and everybody, he has to play that he's weak. He has to play that being an intellectual and having knowledge and having cultural things like poetry and painting at his fingertips is meaningless to the military, the governor, and what people don't realize about Zorro is actually a figure of protest. So what I'm doing and what interested me about Zorro is I have to study what is the nature of protest, what's the meaning of protest, And one of my ideas for an exhibition of Zorro was to show, news clips of horrible things with people being dragged off the streets by army people and disappearing forever, while on the other screen was Zorro sword fighting all the bad guys over and over again. And then you see these two images, and you see the fantasy of the solution versus the reality that families are hurt. They're feeling this right now in a war situation that is going on in another part of the globe. So that may be an idea for a future exhibition, I don't know. But, these things come out when you're thinking of it, or, again, usually with me, it's 2 or 3 other images are colliding, and then I try to figure out if it would work for Zorro or a Superman thing or something.
Yeah, and here we get a sort of a layout of the exhibition, the way I guess you designed it in the very beginning. Was it clear from the beginning that you wanted to tell it as an evolution of modern superheroes? Because that's how it reads nowadays when you walk through it.
I had no idea what this was going to be. And this is what is amazing about the idea or the title, and then meeting someone like Yana, who basically liked the idea and trusted me. Remember, a superhero cannot tell a lie. So I did not tell a lie in telling her that I had everything. And then, she said, do you want to do this? Can you do it? And of course, Douglas Fairbanks would say, yes, I can do this. I'll be right over. And so she trusted me. And when she trusted me, and I had probably exaggerated in my ability to do any of this, I said, let's do it. And she showed me the red house, and it was not the size or the space I had any idea of. I was thinking in terms of your typical, like the Museum of Contemporary Art, which has blocky square rooms. Suddenly I have this long shape I got to deal with, and one doorway, and I think, what can I do? And I have all this stuff. And that's when I started thinking in terms of the metaphor of the labyrinth, and as a way to have certain kinds of posters come out of the wall. And then the whole joke about having the middle exhibition, the important part for me was the letter Z, which one side is an exhibition of original artwork, and the other side is the history of Zorro, Douglas Fairbanks, and Johnson McCulley. So then I had to come up with the entire history in a circular, zigzaggy kind of momentum. So you get the idea. Mm-hmm. Well, then you still think, how's this going to happen? And I meet a man by the name of Caesar who's going to build it. And I think, you poor guy, I said, good luck, And then suddenly pictures of the walls going up. And I go, I don't believe this. They're building it. Now I'm getting nervous. Do I have enough? Was I kidding myself? What's going on here? So the whole thing is coming into reality. And then when we load up all the stuff in the truck and drive here on a Sunday, Elena opens the door, and suddenly there's these walls to fill. And I go, okay, what goes where? I don't have any idea. I'm making little notes to myself. I'm making continuity, but will it fit and stuff? And so I'm very grateful for my girlfriend, sweetheart, and fellow artist, Rika Dorikarer. That's how you say her name in Flemish, but she's a Flemish painter. We kind of have a painting team that in America, when we exhibit together, I am the Yankee realist, and she is the Flemish expressionist. And it demonstrates, sort of like in a comical way, but a serious way, the difference between man and woman. And so we had a great collaboration in structuring the show then, because I would keep it in a very sort of like museum dotted line, or as we say, follow the yellow brick road, if you want to think about, Wizard of Oz. But then when we were trying to structure the ending, she suggested this whole elaborate wall setup, which cut my ideas in two and combined them into a cloud effect. Well, I thought that was great, so we had to stop forward momentum in one direction and start from the ending and then take the ending to the middle. And you can't, how do you figure that out unless you're standing there on the gun, what are we going to do now? What do you think? Oh, I don't like that poster. That's my favorite poster. You know, we had discussions like that. And, but, you know, you trust that your direction is where you need to go, and this thing is coming to life all by itself. And I go there every morning, I'm surprised. I can't believe it's there.
And we will have a look at a few more images from that in just a few minutes. But first, Lika, I'd like to lead over to you, since we learned a bit about sort of the origin of superheroes. In your exhibition in Basel, I also found a superhero reference. There's one work with a superheroine, Bikini Woman.
Yeah.
But apart from that, you don't have that much superhero stuff in your oeuvre. What's your relation to classical superheroes?
I was never a great fan of superheroes. I didn't used to read comic when I was a child, so I learned it. It was later on when I get in touch with these characters. But I think my heart was always with the losers. And this strip series is about a woman. She's always having bad luck, and she's it's a very feministic theme, and yeah. But my superpower is not to speak all day
But this
long.
this was just actually a bridge to lead over to another hero.
Yeah.
Another hero of your work, because the story of your father that you convey in this new book of yours, Starkes Ding, it's basically an important chapter in the history of your father, who is also almost like a superhero. We see him here on the cover, Starkes Ding, strong thing. There is even a superhero character called the Thing in the Marvel universe. But here he is a young farm boy, and he experienced something that's incredible when you read about it. Your father has qualities to show super strength in very difficult times. Maybe you can tell us a bit about what this book is about and how the idea of telling his story in such a way came about.
The story is about this contract child that we had in Switzerland. And he was given away when he was 11 or about 12. He had to go to another farmer and work there for money and for very little money, and he had to give it back to his family. And of course he was homesick, and they haven't been very nice to him, these farmer people. He had to stay there for more than 4 years, and I really asked myself how he came over this time, and he must have some superpower. And during the drawing, I once thought about if I should give him some superpower to overcome this story in the book. Yes, I thought about, but then I thought it would make it would make him smaller if I would give him superpower. I realized that it was important to show that it was the power of a human, of a child who get through this part of life.
Yeah.
And yes, as you said before, sometimes you get on a point in your life you have this test, and you can show how, or you have to show how strong you are, and sometimes the strength can grow a lot.
And this story is mostly told in a very sort of semi-realistic style, or almost looks a bit like naive traditional drawings. I think there's also some explicit references to a traditional way of drawing in this area. Right?
I let myself inspired by the Centrumsmalerei. It's an old kind of oil painting. It's a bit naive, and there is a big freeness to show feelings in the painting, and yeah, so it's a bit like in a children book, and I thought it matches together with this child story.
Yeah.
And the first part of the book, it's more like still a good still a good life, although it was very strong. Also, they were very poor, and they had to fight about their lives. But it still, everything was okay. And then when it turns to the moment he had to go away, then it becomes more absurd. The whole picture language.
Yes, and that's what I was just going to refer to, because this is one of the crucial scenes where the parents sit together at a table with the older farmer who needs help, and they basically sell their child to this other family almost. I mean, to me, it almost looked like a bit of, reminding me of a slave trade or something, even though he was just rented out, but it had that feeling because he had no rights. And then in this almost sort of magic moment, his face appeared in the cup, because it was decided that he was the middle child of 7 children, so he had to be given away. But you have almost like a magic realism there, or surrealism that kind of enters the scene, starting from here, right? Yeah.
First of all, I didn't know exactly the scene, how it really goes. There was no story from my father, because he was not in the room when they discuss about it, so I had to imagine the scene, how it was. And the other thing is that when I thought about it, it must have been very hard for the parents to discuss about this, and maybe they really they didn't feel. I imagine that they really went out of their feelings, of their body, to to make this decision. So I decided to use those just things.
Yeah.
And this matches again with the theme, with the think child.
And then later we see how he basically is just used as a farmer non-stop. He has to work very hard work. It's brutal. He often gets also beaten by his new master. Here's a scene where he meets a fellow kid, and his behind is swollen from being beaten, I guess. So you were saying earlier your father didn't tell you about this one particular scene, but your father, who's still alive in an old in a senior's home, he's 85, I think, right?
Yeah.
He was still there to talk about these things. How much did you actually do interviews for this book? How much did you collaborate with him for this book?
We talked about 2 years. I started to talk about it with him. And until the very end, we talked about he told me stories about it. At the end, I really had to change scenes I already drawn because he came up with new episode. And yes, we started with very detailed questions. I started and then it was really like magic when he got back to his memories. he didn't know before. He never told those memories, those episodes, and I came to him always with 2 or 3 questions, and get back home with a bunch of new stories. So it was. I really worked parallel on the book, and I was drawing at the same time.
Yeah, and some drawings are just almost like. They make me think of old Dutch masters from like hundreds of years ago, because they're partly almost apocalyptic. There's a lot of violence in there. There's the hand that's beating the boy. There's people going crazy. There's hunger and fear, and there's also the love of the animals. Did some of these images just sort of occur while you were drawing them, or was it all planned based on the stories he was telling?
Yeah, it's really based on the stories. But it's in the 4th tile of the book, and I just put it together 3 years, because I thought it's always the same. It's always this hard work, and it cumulates and it would be boring to show another 3 years doing exactly the same work, and. I thought it would be nice to let him fall in this tableaus of this old Centums paintings, and to really to just show this Albtraum,
the
nightmare. Yes.
And these are spectacular pictures that in the end of the book, you have them on double pages there, and in the museum they're even a bit bigger and even more dramatic, that show the trauma that he experienced. How was it for your father to retell this story for you? Because you mentioned at some point that in the beginning he hadn't told you so much about it, but then for the book you asked him. Was it maybe a good opportunity for him to get it out, or was it painful at the same time to revisit that?
I think it was painful, but I think it was more. There are more of the good things that happened. He really, he never thought that I would be interested in all this story, and so we find out that we have a lot of things in common. It was really a good time, and it still goes on that we talk about these things, and. Also, all these things that happened before he left the home, how they lived at home, this very natural way to live, and it was so nice to get to know this part of life of him. And before, we never talked about. So this book was a real bridge for us to get to know. It's the same with when I tried to imagine how he was as a child, as a boy. It was also quite magic. Then when I drew his character, I really tried to imagine how he looked like, how he was, because he was always my father. He was always the big, strong man, and now. I really met him as a boy.
Yeah, and you let us meet him too, which is beautiful and touching. I would like to jump over to you, Peter, and sort of put this work of Lika in a bit of a comic history context, and ask you about the different sort of venues of comic history that we can see in your show, because on the one hand you come from sort of mainstream entertainment, Zorro, superheroes, Superman, Prince Valiant. Here we see some classic sort of mainstream superhero stories, and then at the same time we see in your exhibition also a lot of key works from some of the artists of underground comics, independent comics, which start in the 60s basically to tell stories that created a foundation for what Lika is doing now, because they went against the mainstream. They started to question the establishment, and they started to tell personal stories, often about biographical stuff and personal stuff, private stuff, and all sorts of struggles of real life. In your show, these two venues come together. For many people, it's either mainstream or indie, but is the impression right that for you, they are sort of two sides of the same coin?
Well, the thing is, a good story is a good story. But of course, with Superman and adventure characters, what you're dealing is a situation where the reader, whatever age, gets a solution to solve a problem, and it's done through heroic means. But again, the symbol is that we all can do this because we all have these abilities should we be tested. Now, the more interesting stories, again, for the underground cartoonists, which began in the late 60s, the major influence was Justin Greene, who did a comic book, which is autobiographical, called Binky Brown Meets the Holy Virgin Mary. And this was his own reaction and development through the religious structure of his family life. His father was Jewish and his mother was Catholic, and he had all these kind of, you might say, almost sexual, what do you, now I'm losing a word here that I need, but anyway, he would have these, you might say, visions or things that would make him be very self-reflective in a negative way. And so he worked his way through this, becoming an artist and turning it into comedy, essentially. But it's still an amazing graphic underground cartoon, and that's what opened the door for Aileen Crum to do her autobiographical stories, which are all, again, very humorous sort of thing. It helped inspire Art Spiegelman to do Mouse. And that's one of the amazing graphic novels that never fails to be impressive and incredible. And then, of course, Robert Crumb then said, okay, I can tell my stories too, because everybody's going to find out about my life anyway. And so he has all his humorous asides and things like that about his childhood or his hippie days and things like that, which are usually funny in retrospect. And but I think the story with your father is more interesting in the sense that it's sort of like a dialogue with a parent, and like in Art Spiegelman's case, it's a whole another world that our parents existed in that we don't have even our feet in, you know. The world keeps changing the way it does, and thanks to technology, everybody is experiencing life 3 times faster than their parents, or 6 times faster than their grandparents. And so one of the things about comics is it's still an intimate, one person reading a book thing where you can get into a story. And this is amazing when you can relate to personal family histories, either of comedy or tragedy. So I think it's great that you did this.
And have you ever thought about it? You mentioned Robert Crumb, who did a lot of autobiographical stuff. You're friends with him. Have you ever thought about also doing more autobiographical?
Personally, me.
Personally,
well,
yeah.
I started writing a series of short stories because I never considered myself a writer. Again, like I said, I know what good writing is and I know what it looks like, but I always thought in visual images. I always felt like I was leaning more towards the fine art world and that kind of art market thing, but the fun was actually in the comic books, where you get to, again, I always thought somewhere I would end up working at least on some projects with Superman or Superboy or something, as a fun thing that would make me acknowledge the debt that I felt as a kid enjoying these things so much and keeping them. I mean, I still have all my comics that I read in 1960, and I look at them, and these guys still show me how to draw and how to tell a story, and I'm amazed that these are magical. And so I believe in magic, so I like this stuff. And but to get away from it, I go out and I draw at night, or I start big paintings, and you experiment with things like scale and how big a painting you want to do. And it's the same but I challenge myself in the same way. When I was forced to draw Superman covers for the reprinting of Superman newspaper strips, the only way I could figure being anywhere near how good or how much I like the artist that drew Superman, the only thing I could do was scale. So when I did a cover, I had to draw it 5 feet long. And then when it was printed, the cover of the book is like Superman running and then part of a train, but the real art has the whole train. Or if he's jumping over the buildings with Lois Lane under his arm in a football pose, I had to draw half of New York, for crying out loud, with all the little windows. So the joke is to the collector that bought that, you know, Pete charged $1 a window for this original. And so I enjoy to see my own work because I know the scale is different and it emerges from the wall in a different way. But I'm considering it from the point of view that I'm looking for fine art, and I'm not really telling a story, but I'm trying to use that as a graphic to yank the potential purchaser of the book across the room and picking it up.
I'd like to use one thing that you said, Peter, as a bridge to talk a little more about your work. Lika, you said work like this must be a unique experience also to enter the world of your father, which was probably full of discoveries for you. Here in the show, we see some of the artwork and even a sculpture you made based on your father's hands, which I found particularly impressive. To what extent did you have through making this book, did you develop a whole new relationship with your father and to his past? Here we see that in some of the display cases we also have historic photos from your father's life. To what extent was there a new relationship to him and to his past that evolved through this book?
I really realized that I would to hold back some things, to document a few things. They would get lost. How they treated the animals, how they collect the herbs and the cereals to make bread and things like that, or the hand. I realized that this hand would they're gonna be lost in Switzerland. These big hands who had to work very early, and they really grow quite big. And now we have machines who doing this. They doing this work, and then I thought, yes, I really came into this feeling to document and to collect these
and
things.
To preserve it also, it maybe for the future.
And another thing was that in the exhibition I had in every space I had the possibility to make some object words, to put in some object works. Because I like to do also sculptures, and so it was the concept to have in every room to have some objects.
Yeah.
So in this room it was this hand in bronze.
Yeah.
And one good thing at this metal is you really can touch it. And you can really put your own hand on this big hand and combine it.
And here we see the real hands of your father. And this looks like one scene. This was in a large article in the Neue Zürcher Zeitung, a daily newspaper. This looks like maybe a scene that one could imagine as a typical scene of you working on images, memories, collecting them. Yeah.
It was also a great luck. I got this box of old photos from his sister. Later she died. I was really lucky I get this. And picture are really motors to get back to certain memories.
Yeah. Well, thanks for now for sharing this. I would like to open up the podium to see if there are any questions or remarks, anything you would like to ask our guests, anything that made you curious to hear a little more about one thing or another. Now would be the chance. I have one last question to summarize things, and then if there are any more questions, you still have another chance. Since we're at the Comics Festival, and you both come from so many different venues. You're doing fine arts, both of you. You're doing performances. You're doing illustration. You're doing fabric, text, all sorts of things. But then comics is where we meet, where you meet with your work, where we all meet here at Fumetto. What's the unique thing about comics, or what's making comics special for you to include that in all the art forms that you are using?
I think in comic you really can tell a story, and especially when it's a book, it would go to many more people than it would go as a fine art exhibition. Or except you are a really big artist. But I think that's one of the good things.
Well, again, I always think of it as if you drawn, made a good book, or you've done a good cover or something, you've made something a magic object, which means that someone, or, whether they're a collector or reader or whatever, sometimes it'll surprise them, but it's a magic object that you can't live without, and it will inspire you at different times. So it's just there. Waiting for a rereading, or, just to, Rika and I have a phrase, we say, I got to go out and change my brain now, which means I'm, like I have to do a drawing of Conan the Barbarian, so I had to read pulp magazine stories and then walk around saying, why do I have to do this? But, you change your brain by walking around and then maybe drawing a landscape or something, and then go back and make figure studies and build on something and see where you can take this. And so having something that's related to comic books and stuff like that is, like I say, sort of like a magic tool.
Especially when there are some blankets, and it will be a really participating thing. Especially when it's not so hermetic, you can really go into and dive into a story, like you would really live it.
Like you find yourself in it as a reader too. I mean, that's what I experienced in your book also, because you can relate to it. Because there's room for the reader's emotions and to think yourself in there. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for sharing all that, and thank you very much for creating all these magic objects. If there's any last-minute questions now, you can ask them. Otherwise, you'll have a chance to talk to our guests later in person. Also, there will be a signing tomorrow where Lika is signing at 12 to 2. And make sure you attend both their exhibitions here at Fumetto and in Basel. Thank you very much for coming, and maybe see you again tomorrow at the last Fumetto talk, and enjoy the rest of your festival. Thank you.
Success, success.